Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Think of this as your ultimate handwritten study guide. Today, we're exploring the absolute foundation of India's agriculture, its economy, and really its ecological survival, the soil. We're going to break down the anatomy of Indian soils, the pretty severe degradation crisis we're currently facing, and finally, the cures that can actually bring our land back to life. Here is our quick roadmap for today. We've got 1, India's 8 major soils, 2, the Great Degradation Crisis, 3, the macroeconomic cost, 4, government schemes and solutions, and 5, the path to restoration. Let's start right at the beginning with Section 1, India's 8 major soils. So if we look at the big 4 soils that totally dominate the subcontinent, alluvial soil is the absolute heavyweight. It covers nearly half of India's total geographical area. We're talking about 45.6%, and it acts as the main engine for wheat and rice in the river plains. Then, of course, we have the black soils of the Deccan Plateau, the red and yellow soils down in the peninsular region, and those heavily leached laterite soils you'll find in the Western Ghats. Now, if you're taking notes on Indian geography, a super crucial distinction to know is the difference between the 2 main types of alluvial soil. Cotter is the fresh, highly fertile alluvium. It gets replenished by fine river silt every single year during the floods. Bongar, on the other hand, is the older alluvium. It sits on higher ground and is really easy to recognize because it's full of these tough little lime nodules called conker. If you've got a mental highlighter handy, definitely use it on this definition of regger. That's the traditional name for black soil. Because it comes from volcanic basalt, it has a massively high clay content. And what's really amazing is this self-plowing behavior it has. Basically, during dry cycles, it shrinks and forms these deep vertical cracks. It's naturally aerating the earth before swelling right back up when the monsoon hits. It's pretty incredible. Which brings us to Section 2, the Great Degradation Crisis. Now, this number should honestly set off some alarm bells. According to the ISRO Desertification and Land Degradation Atlas, 97.85 million hectares of India's land is currently degrading. That represents nearly 30% of the entire country's geographical area. So what's actually driving this? Well, the pressures are largely anthropogenic, meaning they are human-made. We're looking at massive topsoil loss from water and wind erosion. But it's also about exactly how we farm. Things like wildly unbalanced chemical fertilizers, severe over-irrigation that leads to salt buildup, and relentless monocropping. You know, those endless rice-wheat cycles that just totally exhaust the land. Beneath our feet, a massive chemical imbalance is happening. The ideal ratio of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, your NPK, is roughly 4 to 2 to 1. But, driven largely by historical subsidies that made urea incredibly cheap, our actual national average has skewed completely out of whack to 7.7 to 3.1 to 1. We are literally flooding the soil with nitrogen and starving it of everything else. It helps to think of the soil exactly like a bank account. Every single harvest, Indian crops withdraw about 20 million tons of essential nutrients from the ground. But between fertilizers and organic matter, we deposit way less back in. That leaves a structural deficit of about 8 to 10 million tons every single year. And as we all know, you can't run a deficit like that forever without eventually going bankrupt. Scientists actually refer to this as the organic carbon crisis. Soil organic carbon is essentially the battery that powers soil microbial life and fertility. Historically, Indian soils sat at a really healthy 1.0% or even higher. Today, decades of intensive farming and residue burning have drained that battery down to a critical 0.3%. Moving right along to Section 3, the macroeconomic cost. So what does this degradation actually cost the nation in hard economics? An extensive assessment by TERI, the Energy and Resources Institute, calculated the total annual economic cost of land degradation and land use change in India. The final bill? A staggering $48.8 billion US dollars. That is roughly 3.17 trillion rupees every single year. To put that into perspective, that $48.8 billion means this isn't just some fringe environmental issue. Degradation is actively erasing 2.5% of the entire national GDP. And even more severely, it represents a nearly 16% loss in the gross value added from the agriculture, forestry, and fishery sectors. The TERI assessment made one thing abundantly clear, and this forms our core economic case for action. Quote, "It is significantly cheaper to reclaim land than to allow degradation to continue." Sure, restoration costs money up front, but sitting back and watching the land's productive capacity literally vanish, that is vastly more expensive. Okay, Section 4, Government Schemes and Solutions. Over the last decade, we've really seen an escalating policy response to this crisis. In 2015, the Soil Health Card was launched. Then, in 2019, India hosted the UN Convention to Combat Desertification COP14, making some massive global commitments. And recently, in 2023, the government rolled out the PM Pranam scheme to finally tackle that fertilizer imbalance we talked about earlier. Let's look at the Soil Health Card. With over 24.74 crore of these issued, it acts just like a personalized medical chart, but for a farmer's specific field. Instead of just guessing what the soil needs, farmers get a lab-tested diagnostic report telling them exactly which nutrients are missing. That way, they can apply precisely what is required and nothing more. And then there's PM Pram Nam. Its clever economic design basically uses financial incentives to gently steer states away from those heavy chemical fertilizer subsidies. It takes the savings from those chemical subsidies and redirects them to promote natural, organic nutrient management instead. Finally, Section 5, the path to restoration. The global framework for recovery right now is the UN's Land Degradation Neutrality, or LDN. The goal here is simple: keep global land resources stable. Step 1 is to avoid new degradation entirely. Step 2 is to reduce any ongoing damage. And Step 3 is to reverse past degradation by actively rehabilitating the land. So, how do we make LDN a reality on the actual ground? Farmers can rebuild that crucial soil organic carbon and refill the nutrient bank account by doing a few key things: rotating crops with nitrogen-fixing legumes, adopting zero tillage to protect the topsoil, integrating trees through agroforestry, and using organic amendments like compost and biochar. All of this effort builds toward India's massive international commitment. By the year 2030, the nation aims to restore 26 million hectares of degraded land. It's an incredibly ambitious target, but as we've just seen, it's absolutely vital for both our ecological and economic survival. I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder. The science is totally clear, the economics are absolutely undeniable, and the solutions are well within our reach. The only question left is, how will we choose to value the very ground beneath our feet? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.